Hello and welcome to a brand new podcast series. This is episode 1 of Tales from the Toy Store, a new podcast where myself, Justin Ashley, and my co-podcaster, Mark Skews,
Hello,
will be talking about topics in the collectible industry coming from collectors and myself, who is a collectible store owner. I do own a toy store, the shirt that I'm wearing right now. Fly By Night Movies, Games, and Toys, located in downtown Oshawa. Quick plug. And Mark, who is a professional comic book collector. Can I say professional?
I haven't made any money off it,
Yeah.
so I think that's probably the bar for professional collecting, right?
Right, but I would say being a professional collector means you actually are collecting it to enjoy it. You're not doing it what I'm doing, which
Correct.
is getting shit. I'm acquiring stuff to make money off of it.
That's right.
And I should say, I don't deal with comics, so my store deals with toys, very specific toys, mostly Funko Pops, and movies and video games. So I don't deal with cards and I don't deal with comics. So that's interesting that you actually bring background in both those collecting categories.
Correct.
So it gives us different perspective on that. And where did the idea of this podcast start?
I think we've been talking about this for years now.
Right, literally years.
Right.
Right.
You were always interested in the trifecta of fun, I believe, the movies, games, and toys, which I've got a little bit of experience with. I'm a little bit older than you, so I was a child in the 80s, so we had that in common, particularly with the movies and toys aspect of it, right? And I think just from there, the interest kind of kicked off, and we always just said, hey, we should just record this.
Right.
No one will want to watch it,
Right.
but we can watch it.
Much like all the other content on
That's
my
correct.
show, it is going out into the void, right? To never be watched.
That's right.
Yeah, consistently.
Right.
But I think this started because I originally, when we started hanging out, we should say we are friends. Ooh, okay. We should put that on the rack. Well, I mean, I think of us as friends. I don't know.
I'm not your friend.
Okay. Yeah. You definitely didn't start as a customer, though. I met you. We've known each other for ages now, but when we started hanging out originally, I didn't have the store, if you can recall. No. At the time, I was just a scummy landlord. Yeah, slumlord, if you will. Yeah, that was the only thing that would have been on my resume, really. And I think this came about because as I slowly started to build my store. I've had my store for 7 years now. So I started it in 2016. Still going strong,
Done very well.
Yeah, survived COVID, so it did something right. But I think you were just kind of enamored by the inner workings of the collectibles business.
Right.
Because you would always, every time we hung out, you would always have these prepared questions for me to answer.
Correct.
And it was always something... it was always either something about the ideology or the mindset of collectors that I sold to, or it was like strict business. Yeah. It was like how you make money off toys and shit like that. Right.
Yeah, I've always had an interest in finding out what makes people's jobs unique, right? So I'm always interested in asking them those kind of probing questions. But I think with you going into the collectibles business, it was that much more interesting because you're almost doing something that everyone wants to do,
right,
but no one gets to do, right?
It's like every collector kind of, and I hear it all the fucking time. Right. It's like, oh yeah, I could do this. The amount of shit I got in my basement, I could open my own store. I think so many collectors have that mindset.
That's right.
Of I could do that.
They have inventory for a week.
Right.
I think you've learned that lesson.
Well, they might no. It's not even just the inventory problem. They also need a little thing called customer service.
That's right.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of collectibles stores neglect that part. I think actually a lot of collectible stores start as like myself. Like I'm a huge collector, but I think they start as collectors, turning that like hobby into their main business, or they try to.
Correct.
But a lot of them don't bother with the retail, theory of how to maintain customers and customer experience.
Just because they have an interest in it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they should be doing for a living.
Yeah, right? It doesn't necessarily mean they're good at dealing with people.
That's correct.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and that's I know we're not going to name stores, but that is that is definitely an issue in my industry.
Mm-hmm.
Is so many are just, yeah. I mean, it's almost like a lot of these guys use it as like their own little trophy. You know, it's like, look at all the things I have, and they're not really concerned about the actual business. You know,
And it falls apart rather quickly.
yeah, gaining and maintaining customers. But this is the kind of shit that you were always asking me about, and it would always generate these interesting like dialogue exchanges between us. So we were for the longest time being like, okay, we should film. There might be something of value here. Maybe we should film this, and because a lot of what ends up happening is what starts as more specific to my store quickly turns into a discussion about just the larger ideology of collecting and the mindset of collectors, and we both have perspective in that field. What would you say you collect yourself personally?
Comics would be the big one now. I try to collect key issues. The big thing for me is really just attachment to the childhood, right? When I was young and these issues had already been old at this point, the idea that, well, I'm never going to have that, right? So now that I'm a little bit older, I have a little bit of my own money, right? And I can go and acquire some of these.
Yep.
It's kind of like completing, a goal that you had as a child that you never thought you'd be able to do, right? So just trying to find these in the wild and add them to the collection. It's not for profit. It's not for selling. Somebody will eventually benefit from me owning all these books, right? It definitely won't be me, because I'll be long since gone. So
something that we often joke
that's
about.
Correct.
That I like to say, I hope that you put me in your will, because, I mean, let's just make it easier for your wife, because I'm going to be pestering her. As soon as you are buried, as soon as they like put that last bit of dirt on top,
still warm.
Right, I'm immediately going over to your house. I'm like, so did Mark say what do you want to do with his comics?
I'll just I'm going to help you with this.
Why don't you let me handle it?
That's right.
Yeah, I managed to get tens of dollars for you.
She'd probably be like, it's fine. Take it. I don't care.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I wasn't attached.
I never cared.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, I've always collected, even when I was a kid, Marvel trading cards, baseball cards, anything that I get my hands on. Biggest thing was, for me, collecting was part of trading as well. Like, when you're a kid, you don't have money, right? So if you want something and your friend has one, the only way you're going to get it is by having something that you can offer them, right? So those two things kind of went together for me, collecting and trading. So I've always been interested in that, and just the social aspect of sort of putting that together.
Do you collect anything else now? Like, you do a little bit of toys, a little bit of Blu-rays and shit,
Yeah,
right?
not so much. I mean, you got to be careful with space eventually, and you get to a point where you're just like, okay, I got to tone this down a little bit, because you're right, there's so much good stuff out there.
Right.
And I won't have space to live if I ended up collecting everything that I'd like to have.
Yeah, try owning a fucking toy store where it's like everything is, and literally imagine owning a store where all the shit that you always wanted suddenly just walks in on the regular. Yeah, it becomes a problem.
Oh,
quick.
we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. All right. Cool. But I think this gives the audience more of an idea of the premise of the show. Right. We should mention, so it started with Mark always pestering me with these annoying questions, and I would, I'd have to think on my feet, and it would create this great dialogue. That's going to continue, because I never knew what the fuck you were going to ask me, but you always had these prepared questions, and we have decided to continue that theme for this podcast. So I have prepared nothing.
That's right.
I have zero notes for this. I don't know. There's no topic or subject that I have planned. You have a list of questions that you want to ask me. I don't know what the fuck you've written.
I have not prepared you whatsoever.
Right. And so we're just going to see what happens. We'll just let the magic happen, right? Is there any more preamble you want to add, or were you ready to?
Well, I think the first question that I'm going to ask you will provide some preamble for the viewers.
You didn't even look at your phone there.
No,
so you
I already know.
You were rehearsing this on the drive over here. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, because some of these questions are questions that we have talked about in the past, right? We would go out for dinner on the weekend,
Right.
and you'd want to talk about anything other than the store. So of course I'm going to talk to you about
That's
the store and your
literally
business, right?
all you want. We would go out to dinner, and I felt so bad for your wife, where it would be literally a fucking hour of me just recanting like, a Comic-Con experience and shit. And I would just be like, don't you guys want to talk about what you guys got going on? They're like, no.
This right
Right?
here.
Yeah. No. You tell us about the art of selling Funko Pops and shit like that. Yeah.
So I guess where I would like to start with you is that obviously, we did a little bit of preamble into collecting, but I think most people can relate to collecting in a personal way. But for you have collecting as a part of your business, right?
Right.
This is how you earn a living. This is how you eat every day, which is unique, right? Most people don't do that. And I wouldn't have thought that you would have done that either, because your education background is in filmmaking, right? So that's quite the stretch.
Oh, we're getting into this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, I mean, it's not like you set out to do this, right?
No.
You were dead set on being a filmmaker and
Still am.
learning that trade. Yeah, making quality productions like this one. And then all of a sudden one day I hear you're opening a store where you're selling movies, toys, games, and whatever else kind of walks in. So walk me through how that kind of decision, because that blows me away.
Well, without getting into too much, and I don't want to turn this into like a biography on my life, but I went to school for film. We knew each other when I was in high school. That's actually when we first met, working at Staples. And I was a huge geek, as you are, and
You still are.
yeah, correct, as we both are. And I think that's why we bonded very quickly back then. And I was a huge, even in high school, I was huge into video games, huge into movies, and I did dabble in collecting like action figures, which at the time would have been like McFarlane.
Mm-hmm.
McFarlane toys were the shit at that point, right? Like the Movie Maniacs line and all that.
Right.
So I was a big collector, and I came out of high school, and I wanted to be a filmmaker because I just was a huge movie nerd, like loved it, loved the art of filmmaking, all that shit. And I had ambitions of being a filmmaker. And that's what I went to school for, and I went to university for it. And if you watched my podcast with Kevin called Recently Watched, you'll see a whole little segment where I annoy him with my film degree, because I do, in fact, have a film degree. Yes.
Ad nauseum.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I know, but the funny thing is I never bring it up because it's not what I ended up doing. Like this is still a side hustle. It's not even a hustle. I don't make money off of this. So hustle implies there's some money.
Costs you money.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
it.
correct.
Right.
Actually, correct. Yeah. So I had the goal of becoming a filmmaker, and then I think I just realized very early on that the odds of having anything happen in that industry that you want to do, and the amount of time you're going to sacrifice for that opportunity is so great that I wasn't willing to do it. And I should say that while I didn't necessarily have a background in retail, I do have a large background in wheeling and dealing. So I was always naturally good at flipping shit.
Right.
Like, the anecdote of like the kid on the playground that sells shit to the other kids. Yeah, that was me.
That was you.
That was literally me. So I was always good at buying and selling shit.
Yeah.
I was very good at selling things to people. I mean, we worked at Staples, so you saw me, like I used to, literally, you saw me sell to customers. I was always good at that. So what happened was when I went into university for film, this is bad, but I literally used my OSAP money, like the Ontario government or the federal, whatever it is, the federal government, like the student loan. I used that money to start funding like my collecting hobby, and it started getting pretty serious. So it started out as I suddenly had this big chunk of change in my bank account.
For the first time ever.
Right, exactly. And I was very responsible with money, and I still was working full-time at Staples at the time.
Yep.
So I didn't actually need that money really to pay the bills, but here's a good chunk of money just sitting in my bank account. YouTube started blowing up at that time, specifically video game collectors posting videos about like hidden gem video games. And it was when it was like this special time where all of a sudden these collector personalities started popping up, and it influenced me hugely. And it made me want to get like really into the hobby. And it started with video games. And I went hardcore into collecting video games. I started off going for the consoles that I never had as a kid. Like I literally had some Nintendo consoles. We weren't rich. Like we were, what is it? Like lower middle class. I don't know what you would call it now. Poverty, I guess is what you call it now. But like we didn't have a lot of money. So like I didn't have every console ever made. You know, we weren't spoiled by any means. And there was a lot, but what I didn't know was like, I didn't know about the Sega CD and the Sega Saturn and the Philips CDI and the Panasonic 3DO. Like, and the internet kind of opened my eyes to all this weird shit. And I just went ham wild buying up all this stuff. And I bought it up like crazy. I bought it up at a time when video game collecting was still in its infancy. It hadn't really matured at all. Like it was very early on. The shit you could get back then for the prices you could get back then. Whoa.
The concept of a sealed, new in package video game was like, well, open that up. You can't play it if it's still sealed.
Right?
Dumbass.
Crack the thing and fucking play it. Right? Yeah. Exactly that. It was a different mindset. It was just starting to become kind of, because there was goons like me. So like I was kind of in that first wave of people. It's mostly like 80s and 90s kids, right? Looking back on the NES and the Super and the SNES like glory days and wanting to relive that. What ended up happening was what I started doing was I started looking online, so like Kijiji, and Kijiji was like a gold mine back then. Facebook Marketplace wasn't really a thing.
Hadn't come around.
No, hadn't really matured. And so it was more, I was looking at like pawn shops, antique stores, thrift stores back when they would actually price shit like cheap and you could actually get deals, you know?
Yeah.
Before they started charging more than I do at my store now. And I would buy up large collections. So it started out, I just kind of bought, you know, what I wanted. But then it turned into, I started buying larger collections. And what I would do is I would go, okay, so I got this collection for $1,000. And out of that collection, there's 3 games that I want for my personal collection. So I would take those out, and then I would sell off the other shit in the hopes of getting back most of my money back. And so it would be something like, let's say I bought a collection for $1,000. I keep 3 games for myself. And then I sell everything else in that collection for $800. But let's say those 3 games are worth, I don't know, $500. Well, now I got a deal on those games, right? But the best case scenario was I bought a collection for $1,000, I took out the shit I want, and then I sold it for $1,000. So then I got the shit for free.
Or more.
Yeah.
If you could flip it. Yeah.
And that's what ended up happening was it got to the point where not only was I getting my money back, I actually started making profit. So I started getting paid to collect video games in a sense, right? Like,
and you're still in school at this time, right? So you're not necessarily thinking, ooh, career.
No, not at all. No,
but,
I was literally just a side hustle. I was just being thrifty. I was like, hey, I'm a good seller. I'm very good at buying and selling. I'm very good at sniffing out deals. So it was literally just a matter of, it was a cheap way to collect video games because I was doing it I was getting paid for my side, like my hobby, right?
And you essentially got to come into a collectibles industry at the birth of that.
Right.
Right? Because, I mean, video games were kind of just taking off at the time. So if you're ready, willing, and able to kind of buy into that and wait it out, you're able to sort of flip that into some serious profits, right? I mean, rarely do you get the chance to do that. You know, come in right at the beginning of something, and I think you've done very well with that.
I think a lot of people are trying to do that now.
Right.
I think everybody's trying to catch the next like collectible wave, right? I mean, why wouldn't you, right? Because if you can get it right, it's the equivalent of a stock before it skyrockets, right? It's the same kind of idea. But yeah, so that's sorry, that was a whole long story of me in high school and university and shit, and I'm sure most people have tuned out now. I assure you the content will get more interesting as we go. But that's where it started. So it started out that I was always flipping shit as a kid. I used to sell at garage sales. I used to sell at flea markets. And then when I became a serious collector in university while I was in school, I used my student loan to start funding my collecting hobby, and I did it as a side hustle. Right. And I did that as a side hustle. So even after I graduated, I upped the ante a little bit. So I started spending a little bit more money, but it was never my main gig. Like I always had a regular job. I don't know, like 9 to 5 or whatever. You know, I always had a normal gig. This was a side hustle. Mm-hmm. So I used to only sell online, and I would sell at like video game shows.
I was gonna say shows and conventions,
right? And toys, like toy swaps, like video game swaps, like swap meets, like that kind of thing. Flea markets. I used to sell at flea markets,
which give you the opportunity to see and meet other people in the business, see how other people are doing it, and actually figure out whether or not this works.
Yeah, that was literally like training grounds for me.
Right.
Like I learned what to buy, what not to buy. Like what's hot, what tends to go up in value, what do I get asked for all the time. It taught me so much. Those, like that's some of the best training I could have gotten. Mm-hmm. Was that like that's actual experience that you can't really teach that stuff.
Right.
And the other thing is that category was almost being formed at that time. Like nobody really knew before that what you were like. Nobody knew, like, for example, like with genres of video games. Any collector now, you go, what two genres in video games tend to always skyrocket? Role-playing games and horror games. But at that time, nobody fucking knew that. Right. Like nobody knew what you would want to throw your money at, what you wouldn't want to throw your money at. People could have assumed that Sega Genesis games would outpace, Super Nintendo. Nobody knew that, okay, the Nintendo is generally the blue chip stock, and the other stuff is not quite as good investment.
A little bit more volatile.
Right. But at that time, it was all being figured out, and it's funny to look back then and now and see a lot of those rules that we had back then, how they have changed and evolved, because we used to have rules, like a good rule of thumb when I first started was a video game that was, say, $50, whatever the price of the loose cartridge. So we're talking cartridges right now. So we're talking like
just the plastic.
Right.
Yep.
Game Boy, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, whatever that was. If it was CIB, which means complete inbox, or you say complete.
You're getting education here today, folks.
No, literally, yeah. These are the terms. These are the terms we use. But if it was CIB, then the general rule of thumb was it was 2x whatever the price of the cart was.
Right.
That's what it used to be. Now collecting's gone fucking nonsense. So now you see what I'm saying?
You'd be lucky to get it for twice the price.
Right. But see, that used to be a general rule that dealers, so it's like, even if you didn't know, because I knew a lot of dealers, like when we were starting out, I knew dealers that didn't use the internet to price.
Like they just guessed?
They just because literally it was just, it wasn't necessarily guessing, it was experience from the shows. So they would generally see, okay, Mario Kart goes for around $30. So I know in my head it's worth about $30. You got to know at that time, the games didn't jump every year. It was pretty stable and consistent. So like Mario Kart, we're talking Mario Kart. When I say Mario Kart, I mean N64 Mario Kart. N64 Mario Kart at the time when I was selling was $35. This is Canadian, folks, not US. $35 Canadian. It stayed like that for fucking like 5 years. It didn't move. So you would just remember. You would start to know in your head. You'd get like lists.
But the customer that's buying that game at that time isn't buying it to collect it. They're buying it to play it. Right. So the value doesn't change because the purpose is to just play the game. Right. So somewhere along the lines, this has gone from, purpose-built games to go and occupy your time to collecting these games and not play them, right? Not use them as their intended purpose. Right. It's shifted. Right. It's moved across the line in that. Right. And I think that's maybe what you're talking about. Right. It's no longer just a $35 game that someone's going to go home and pop into the system, they're going to keep it in a box and put it on a shelf. Right. And that's when you start to see the value of these things going through the roof, right? When collectability starts to come into it.
Yeah, and it was also like the first, I would say the first like three to 4 years I was actually selling this stuff.
Yeah.
The people that were buying it were all like my age. They were all around that same, like they might have been around my age or around your age, but it was the demographic wasn't what it is now. The demographic now is huge. Young people younger than me weren't watching YouTube videos and buying this shit. Like that wasn't really a thing.
Right.
There was no like bragging about video game collecting early on. It was all just it was all the guys that I used to say, it was a purer time, honestly it was. Because the guys that, you know what I mean by that? It was a simpler time. No, it really was. It really was. And I don't mean to use that like, the rose-colored glasses bullshit, but really it was the guys who I used to sell to, they were all buying the games they had as a kid.
Right.
They're all trying to recapture that childhood nostalgia. That's all. That's what it was at the beginning, And I'm guilty of that. And then the other thing is like the guys at the beginning it was all like, oh, we want to, like me, I didn't have any of the Sega shit. So to me, that was fascinating when I found out about all these weird consoles. I wanted the shit I never experienced. And a lot of guys were like that at the beginning, where they were genuine about playing the fucking games and like experiencing it and learning about it, It was different.
I remember I got a Neo Geo Pocket Color from the flea market once when I was a teenager.
What a bizarre console.
I know. And but the only time I'd ever heard of Neo Geo was the arcade business. And so when I saw this, I was like, it's an arcade in my hands? Wow. And I love that thing. I don't know what happened to it.
We're an interesting, like, deep cut.
You like that?
Like, Neo Geo Pocket. Yeah. I mean, it kind of legitimizes you a bit.
Does it?
Because you threw an interesting one out there, You didn't just say, like, a Game Boy Pocket.
I had the original brick Game Boy.
Oh, me too. Yeah, me too. Yeah. That thing, I think it weighed 15
you could kill
pounds.
Somebody with that.
Yeah, 15 pounds, I think is what that one weighed.
Yep.
You know why we call it a brick, folks? It's because it actually had the weight of a brick. Yeah, the weight and volume of an actual brick.
Correct.
Yeah. Does that answer your first question? Because what was the question again? It was like,
well, just really how you got into doing this as a business, right?
Right.
And,
how did I become one of those goons that was like, well, I'm a collector. I'm going to open a store. Well, again, without getting too much into the weeds and like turning this into a biography on me, I at one point realized, all right, I had a notion. I was always really good at buying and selling shit. I was a huge collector, and I had this idea in my head. I'll be honest, folks. I was really influenced by the show Pawn Stars.
Really?
Yeah, I swear to God.
I don't think I know this about you.
Yeah, well, because I don't like to admit it because it's kind of corny, but I used to watch the shit out of it. I always loved any of those shows about flipping things. I loved watching them. And
so whereas we're growing up watching action stars wanting to emulate them, you're watching Pawn Stars going, oh man, I wish I could hustle people like that. Oh,
that's the life.
That's your hero right there.
Yeah, no, it honestly was. I thought I loved that show. I was so enamored with it, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have my own collectibles store where I could be the place that people bring in the cool shit, I wanted to be that, and I could get it for I didn't have to pay the retail price. I'd get to buy it for the store price, and it was such a cool thought to be like, I'm the business you go to sell your cool shit.
Right.
It just kind of puts you behind the curtain a bit, there's prestige to that. So originally the store was a pawn shop. I don't know if you remember this.
Like before you owned it?
No.
Okay, yours.
No,
your
yeah,
first
yeah. My
iteration.
store, yeah. My store started as a pawn shop, right? I don't know if you kind of remember this. I mean,
I don't know if that lasted very long, did it?
No, it lasted a year. Yeah, and I fucking hated it. So don't open a pawn shop, folks, unless you just want to be a loan shark. A
lot of extra overhead dealing with something like that.
It's just stress. Maybe. It's awful. You're dealing with people on their worst days, and it was depressing, and it's all just loans and pawns, whatever. I fucking hated it. And I quickly transitioned the business. So when it opened as a pawn shop, but let's be honest, it was more like a collectibles pawn shop. It was like It was like a shitty collectible store that also did loans. That's a good way of describing the early years of my store.
You had to do what you had to do to get by in that first year.
Right. And I didn't know what I did. I knew, I'll say this because you're asking me like how I got into it. I knew how to buy and sell video games.
Right.
I learned, and that shit at that time I knew like the back of my hand. But what I didn't know is I didn't know how to buy and sell most of everything else.
Really anything else.
Right. So like I was always good at flipping shit and I knew how to value things, but I didn't know like those years of experience I had with video games, hustling, selling at flea markets, selling online, like learning that community. Mm-hmm. I didn't have that for toys. I didn't have that for movies. I didn't have that for cards. I didn't have it for comics. I didn't have it for any other collectible category. I didn't have it for. And I had to learn the hard way.
It's a risky enterprise to be entering into.
Fuck yeah, it is.
You don't know much about it.
Right. And I literally, like the first couple of years, I was all, you're literally learning. You're learning as you're going. And it's hard lessons. I bought some stupid shit that, never sold. And I had to write that off. And there's a lot of trial and error when it comes to collectibles. And I'll say this. Every collecting category, so we're talking movies, records, cards, be that sports or magic or, trading cards, comics, toys, be it retro or modern or Funko Pops. Every collecting category has its own little rules and all those collectors function differently. And you have to learn, if you want to make money in any of those categories, you have to learn all the little intricacies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Well, like I'm trying to think here. You put me on the top of my head here, but I'm trying to think like how one collector's gonna.
That's the point of the podcast, folks. I'm trying to throw him off his game.
Why are you asking me questions that I don't immediately know? I can't immediately recall, having the answer in the back of my mind. I'm trying to think. So, okay, so like off the top of my head, with movies, like movie collectors, we're a dying breed.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, bingo. We're a huge dying breed. So like with movie collectors, there's different kinds of movie collectors. There's the librarian collectors, and those are the guys that they want every single horror movie ever made, and they have the wall of those. And then there's the more boutique collectors. I think we're both in that category, and we want the shit that's like the things that we think are the best, the cream of the crop. So we're more picky. We're not going to have all the Leprechaun movies on our shelf because we don't fucking care.
We might have started off dreaming of being the librarian collector.
I think a lot of collectors make that mistake.
And then realized, oh, that's not practical at all.
Yeah, it takes up too much room. You were mentioning room earlier, right? And then like within that community, movie guys, there's like, I said boutique. So like that's a term. You learn the terminologies of all these different collector communities. Like with video games, I said CIB earlier or complete. That's a term that you use in that industry, right? So there's all these little, like, I'm trying to think of another one, like mint on card.
Right.
Like the toy collecting community has its own little collector terms that the community they've embraced, and they've made that common terms to use when they're talking about the hobby. They have kind of like a secret language to them, and they each have their own mindset. But to get even more into the weeds though, like I just said, with movies, you could broad stroke it. So so like with movies, there's certain rules that you can follow. So with movies, horror, the few people that collect movies still, horror and anime tends to be the genres those guys go for. The genre, I would say the worst genre that people collect physically for movies is comedy.
Comedy.
Because comedy shit, and it's just not as revered. Like very rarely are comedies put on like the pedestal of like greatest films of all time.
You don't feel like you're part of a special club if you like comedies, because everybody likes comedies.
Right. It's not like having the Criterion Blade Runner.
Correct.
Right. It's not something
good choice. Also a movie I know you are not particularly fond of, so I appreciate the reference. Thank you.
I gave that for you. Yeah.
That was for my benefit.
No, it literally was. But like there's definitely different mindsets within that community. So there's the general rules, like what I just said about the genres, but then you've got the guys that they don't care about the format. You know, they don't give a shit if it's DVD or Blu-ray, and they don't even fucking know what 4K is.
Right.
And then you've got us that I think we're both at the level of like, we want a nice version of the film or the TV show, and if it looks great and it's nice packaging, we're content. But then you got the video file guys that are like, no, it has to be the highest fidelity and the best possible bit rate and resolution, and they will only accept the newest release. Right. You know, and that's the reason it's the reason companies are able to bilk them with the 4K shit, right? Sorry, I have a little animosity towards 4K.
I mean, I don't even have surround sound set up.
There you go. Yeah, so that's a good example, right?
When I was younger, right? It was all about that.
Yeah.
And it just becomes too much effort. You just realize, you know what? I'd rather just have movies that I really enjoy and would watch again no matter what it looks like, no matter what it sounds like. It's the experience of watching the movie. You know, if I'll take the best version of it that I can get, but not at the expense of not having it or spending, you know, my life savings to get it.
Right, but there's a lot of collectors that would hear you say that and be like, this guy is fucking out to lunch.
He's obviously not one of us.
Right.
Because,
so like within... Sorry, I had to burp there, folks. Oh, there we go. I actually got it on the mic too. Yeah, all right, cool. So within each collecting community, like category, there are different subsections of types of collectors. So there's the general rules, and then you've got the types of collectors that are in that category. There's broad strokes, and then there's the like micro, you know, the macro rather, I guess is the way to put it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
you know,
have you asked a second question?
I think so. I can't even remember.
The first one you asked was like, oh, you snuck the second one in.
That's
there.
correct.
Yeah, you snuck the second. You're like, give us an example immediately. Yeah. You said a thing, now back it up, fucker. Yeah.
As a preview of a future episode, I think we're going to have to talk about gatekeeping in collecting, and you know, those who you know, believe that their level of collecting is more valuable than somebody else's, and would want to keep somebody else from entering that. You kind of referenced it a little bit with you know, the video and audio file who would look at someone like us and be like, oh, your collection doesn't have everything. Why are you even trying to do this? Right.
Right.
I think there's
assholes is what you're describing.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah,
right,
assholes. Right. Yeah,
right.
douchebags. I think is that's the general.
That's
term?
probably a more apt term.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Those are also terms in the business that you need to learn. Right.
Douchebag, asshole,
correct.
Fuckhead. Yeah,
right.
things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that is what you just touched on, though. That's a huge, like, you're basically describing snobs, but like the most obnoxious snobs, you know? Right. And I collecting is not immune from, you know, the personality traits of humans.
It's not always a happy place just because it is an area of interest.
No, yeah. Just because we collect fun things doesn't mean we deal with fun people.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. All right. So what do you got next?
All right.
What's my next question?
We've had enough about you and your history.
Yeah. Like fuck me and my background.
Who's this guy?
Right.
I mean, he's just got himself on his shirt. Have you noticed that, folks? Like that's not just a character. That's him. That's who he thinks he is. So,
yeah, I think a lot of people think that.
Like Biff McFarlane might be, you know, just a character, but it's him. Like he wants to be this guy
deep down inside. Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying this knowing full well that if I could be Green Lantern, I would do the same. So I'm not sure. That's not even different. Right?
Yeah, you're not necessarily. You're casting a stone that probably should also be ricocheting and hitting you as well.
Correct.
Right.
The only difference being that I know I can't be Hal Jordan. He's not convinced that he can't be Biff McFarlane.
I'm not convinced I can't be my mascot of my store. Right.
That's right. Right. So, all right. You're obviously at the forefront of the collectibles industry, particularly in the three areas: movies, games, toys that you deal with. What is hot right now?
Oh, I should interject, actually. That is a good question, but I should interject and state, because you were asking, like, what was the genesis of my store? Right. I should mention that, okay, so that weird period where it was a pawn shop, right? And then I decided to turn it into a collectibles store. I didn't actually touch on how I turned, like how I just siphoned it down to, or sorry, siphoned it, filtered it. You know what I mean? Like how I distilled it. Pared it down. How I pared it down to what I ended up sticking with, which is movies, video games, and toys. Originally, I tried everything.
It was just whatever walked through the door.
Right. I tried comics. I tried cards. I honestly dipped my toes in every collectible. I did records. You know, I've done a little bit of everything. Yeah, no, I tried all the different categories. And what I found was the 3 categories that I myself was a part of, movies, video games, and toys, that's what I had the most success selling. Because it was very easy for me to understand what my customer was thinking when I was one of them.
Right.
It was very genuine. You know, there was no, I talked about staples, right? Like, okay, while I think I could sell anything to anyone, I didn't necessarily enjoy it. And I think that's a big part of it is you got to like what you're selling. I think that it makes such a huge difference because then you come across as very genuine because you are genuine.
Right.
You know, if you are coming into my store and buying video games from me or movies from me, I genuinely collect that shit myself. So I'm not just talking out my ass, memorizing some fucking bullet points of like how to sell a laptop or some shit. You know, I'm not just regurgitating information. I know what I'm talking about because I am one of, you know, I am one of you. You know, you come through the door, you're buying off somebody that is part of the tribe in a sense, right?
Here's Justin burying the lead here because one of my additional questions is going to be how do you stay on top of what's hot?
Oh,
right?
okay, that is a good follow-up
So obviously
question.
knowing, you know, you want to be interested in the things that you're collecting and selling, otherwise you're just not going to do it.
Right, well, because I touching on that, like, so cards and comics, while I respect them, I'm not your thing. I'm not part of that community. Right. So this game is, if you want to get good, if you want to be successful at buying and selling collectibles, you have to ingrain yourself in that community. Like I talked about the terminology. I talked about like all the little rules and tricks and things to learn. All those things, you're only really going to become an expert at it if you have the interest in it. Like you have to be interested to learn those things to get good at it. Because a lot of that is off-hour shit.
I was going to say you're researching it when you get home. So,
right. Yeah, right. You're for free. You're essentially doing it for free because you're going to be taking the time, like with movies, like I constantly am watching new movies. I'm constantly reading movie reviews. I have a fucking YouTube channel where I talk about, you know, movies and TV shows that I liked and don't like. So I pay attention to that. I go on gossip websites and I look up new shit that's coming out and, you know, little Easter egg information and trivia facts and things, you know. And
you can get the full plethora of Justin's opinions by following the entire range of Two Name Media podcasts. Is that the plug that you wanted me to?
That's what I was trying to. I was trying to set you up to plug my media company.
His other more successful shows that he has.
On this very network. Network. Now I lost my train of thought. I don't remember what I was saying. Oh, and then so like same thing with video games. It's like I was watching videos of collectors teaching me what to look for, you know, cartridges and discs and all that information. I sought it out myself. So I basically was training myself, and I continue to do so because I pay attention. I'm ingrained in those communities. So that's how I stay up to date, is I am in that community. That being said, I'm going to drop a bomb here. Not everything I sell, I collect.
Oh my God, this is an exclusive. You heard it here first, folks.
I mean, so that's a reality. It's there is shit that I sell that I don't collect. I mean,
that's just the evolution of the business. You've determined what you can...
what's the most profitable, and so there is a bit of that.
And people are going to want things that you are not into,
right?
So
if you only sold, like, if I, like, by that logic, if I was like I sell, I'm in the I sell categories, I sell within categories that I am a part of, and I collect in those categories, but I don't collect every part of those categories while I do sell from them. So like toys is a good example. Toys is such a big fucking collectible category, you know, like you could be talking 80s retro G.I. Joes or fucking He-Man, you know, all that bullshit that no one fucking cares
I have a
about.
list that I am hopelessly waiting for you to carry, but
Transformers.
you don't currently. That's okay. That's all right.
It's all the shit that I have no interest in. But like, so there's like the retro stuff. I'm not really into that. There's like, I collect very specific toys myself, but there's like, you can go Marvel Legends, you can go Star Wars Black Series, you can go DC, which is McFarlane now. I don't collect any of those things, but I sell them. Mm-hmm. I know a lot about them.
You're close enough to it.
I educate myself on it. Yeah. I think that I'm able to do that though, because while I don't collect them, I do respect them. So I still pay attention to those categories, and I pay attention to what collectors tell me. Like your customers are going to educate you, right? If you give them the chance to talk to you, right?
I feel like that should be on a shirt as well. I don't collect them, but I respect them.
That's not bad. Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah, that's not a bad tagline. Considering I definitely struggled with your on the spot question, I'm surprised I was able to pull that out of my ass. That nugget, that grain of knowledge out of nowhere.
So that was a very long-winded way of saying that even though he doesn't like Blade Runner, he still has it in his store to sell because he understands that there are people like me that he has low respect for that will still want to watch that movie.
Correct. Yeah, correct. So now what was your actual second question?
The question before we sort of jump back
right, because I had to say that I sell. I wanted to state what my store specifically sold, so people knew what I was talking about. Like, I don't own a comic store. Right. That's a big thing.
Just in case you couldn't read it off his shirt. Yes, those are the things that he focuses on: movies, games, and toys.
Right.
But the next question was really, so what's hot now?
That's what it was. Yeah. Oh, I can. Well, why don't I start with what's not hot?
Oh, interesting.
So, because we already talked about movies and physical media. I'm going to state this very clearly. Physical media is basically dead.
Really? Okay.
And when I say physical media, I'm talking movies and TV shows. Basically done. The only guys that are still going after, so I would say with movies, the only people still collecting are Luddites, which is usually like old people that they don't really understand streaming, and they probably don't even have streaming
They're not
services.
Interested in learning.
Right.
No.
And so they're just like, oh, I can still, for $5 get a copy of this movie that I like, Ferris Bueller's Day Off or whatever, and it's more convenient than waiting for it to come up on their television for the TV to tell them what to watch.
They finally learned how to do DVD, and they're not learning anything else.
And thank God for them, because they're the only reason I'm able to sell DVDs pretty much. Yeah. So there's those people, and then there's the goons like us. So like, I think you would agree with me, the physical forever camp. Like, have you heard this term?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're in that camp of, unless you can hold it physically and put it on your shelf, you don't really own it. And we're also with the mindset of, we want to own the things we like.
Correct.
And minimalists will think we're nuts for that. And that is becoming kind of a little movement on its own. Right. Judging people like us.
That's another topic for a future episode. The physical element of collecting.
Physical versus digital.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a whole fucking episode.
Right.
I got a lot to say on that. Yeah. No, we won't get into that. But movies are essentially, I guess a good way of putting it is like you touched on. You only have so much physical space. Right. So you only have so much space in your house. So what ends up happening is there's all these different collectible categories, and each community is a different size. So you got to think like, let's say toy collecting, but let's go even more general or more specific. Let's say like guys that collect 80s toys. Well, that's a population of, 10 million people. I'm just using, these numbers are completely out of my ass, but just
no, he's done his research. It's exactly 10 million people that collect 80s
to the
toys.
dot, weirdly, yeah. So there's like guys that collect DC figures and the newer superhero stuff. So like the Marvel Legends and McFarlane DC, and they're like 20 million. Right. So it's a different size of community. And then there's guys that do video games, but there's guys that do modern video games like Nintendo Switch. And let's say they're fucking 50 million. And then there's guys that just do retro carts, and they're 5 million. So the the community groups are different sizes.
Right.
And what I'm alluding to is, as a culture, we decide what we value more than other things. So we give weight to different things because you're ultimately talking about space in your house. So as a culture, there's trends you will notice, and people collectively decide by majority what things they're willing to leave that space for and what things they're not. And I would say movies and music, I'm going to throw music into this too, are things that the average person has decided they're okay with it just being on a hard drive. Like they're okay with it just being on this or on in the cloud. Like
correct.
They don't like on a server that they just get access from.
You know, that's true that you say that, because when I think about my movie collection, it's become very curated over the last few years. I remember when you and I first met, you know, we were talking about DVD collections that were in the hundreds, right? And now I would say it's maybe half of that,
right?
You know, it's also the fact that as you change formats, you want to try to stay up to date with that. And over time, it just gets a little bit difficult to do that, right? It gets tiring to, I got to buy everything again in Blu-ray now.
4K.
That's right. Right. Shout out to Justin's love for 4K.
No, but literally, that's a good point. Yeah.
Right. So eventually you just get to the point where, can I continue to carve out this much physical space for this actual thing, right? But it's a tough balance, right? Because there is an element to collecting that says that if you don't have it, do you really have it, right? So, you know, if Reanimator, I think I own like 4 or 5 copies of that movie, right, across different formats, right? And I wouldn't have it any other way, right? But I wouldn't necessarily say the same thing about other movies, comedies. You know, most comedies, I don't need any copies of that, right? I will watch that on streaming, right? But I want to have my copy of Reanimator in every format so I can watch it. Even if I don't end up watching it, I just want to have it.
Yeah, but you're also touching on another thing there, which is just you're going into the minutia of like how collectors think in general.
Right.
So like there's always going to be the things that you have to have and then the things that you don't really care, you know, but you respect it and you enjoy it, but you don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily get a slot on your shelf.
Correct.
It doesn't necessarily get that spot, you know, the spot to collect dust.
Which is what they all do.
Pretty much, yeah. That's what ends up happening when you collect physical things.
Right.
It definitely accrues dust over time. But yeah, you're kind of touching on a different mindset within that community. But really what I was saying is like, it's more like people decide by majority what things they value physically and what things they don't really care about. And I find with video games and toys more than ever right now, people have decided to open their homes up for toys and also for video games, which don't have a big footprint. But records, not so much. And movies, really not so much. And that's why where that came from, where I said movies right now are one of the worst collectible categories.
They're becoming not hot.
Well, they haven't been hot for years. Right. Like they're not I would say they're past not hot. They're past cooled off. They're just cold. Like the community still exists, and at some point, I don't know, some jackasses are gonna go, "Hey, remember physical media?" And then that's gonna kick off a trend of people will start collecting it to be ironic,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, or something like that. It's kind of how like a lot of hipsters started collecting records,
correct? Because
they thought it was neat and niche, and you know. You can say what you want about like the records industry has blown up over the last couple of years. Yeah, because like it went from, you know, 1 million collectors to 1.1 or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, did it increase? Sure. But you're talking compared to any other collectible category, it is fucking nothing.
Right.
It is a fly on a T-Rex's ass, you know?
You say this as the guy who himself has laser discs strategically placed throughout his home to
Yeah.
To clearly to show off to people. I've known this guy for years. He has never once watched a Laserdisc movie, right? So
No, I watch them. I watch them, but I mean, they're mostly for display, right?
Right,
It's just,
right.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right, absolutely. That's a good example too, though.
the worst part about that is it's actually kind of impressive. I do like his Laserdisc collection.
They're cool as shit.
And I do finger through it every time I come over.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they're cool as shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that you just touched on another thing there, though. It's like, wow, let's not go on a tangent on that. But like, again, it's just each collecting category. There are different kinds of collectors,
Right.
and someone like me, like I go even one step further, where I will, just like you said, you have multiple versions of Reanimator. I like having multiple versions of the same movie, even though. So I collect VHS tapes and I collect Laserdiscs. Those I don't watch those. I watch the Blu-ray, but I have those other formats
Right.
just out of coolness. I like displaying them. They look cool. They're decorations. It's like
Right.
furnishings for my house.
So knowing that movie collecting then is cooled off.
Oh, you want to know what's hot?
Well, no, I was
The
just going to say,
inverse.
for you personally, do you feel that has impacted how you view your collection? Like if the collecting society has kind of agreed that movie collecting is lesser than it was before, do you look at your own collection and feel like, oh, maybe this wasn't, I wish this was more important and prominent than it is now?
Like in the general culture, you
Right.
mean? Yeah. So for me, no, because I'm a demon. So it doesn't bother me at all. I don't give a shit what most people have in their fucking houses. Does the inside of my house look like most people's houses?
No.
No, it doesn't, right? I don't have paintings of random bullshit
Correct.
that match the color scheme of my whatever my wall and decor is, right?
It's a perpetual 13-year-old's house.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks like, well, no, because I didn't have money when I was 13. It's a perpetual like 20-year-old's house where I had that
A little bit.
I had money at that time. I was burning through that OSAP money.
And no one told him ever to take that down.
Oh, people told me. I just got rid of those friends.
That's right.
You just slowly remove those humans, right?
Yeah.
What were we talking about? I lost my train of thought. Something.
Your collection and how.
Oh, you were asking if it because people don't collect it. Does it devalue it to me? So to me, I'm a demon. I don't give a shit. Like to me, I don't care what's in everybody else's house. I'm going to ultimately collect what I want to collect.
Right.
If I know what you're saying if the community shrinks, do you want to bail? That's really what you're alluding to, which is as a collecting category shrinks in interest, like let's just use Beanie Babies.
Right.
No one wants to be the last jackass still collecting Beanie Babies.
Right.
Ultimately people want to feel a sense of belonging to a community. I mean, that's part of collecting, right? What I'm saying is I don't really give a fuck who's in that community. I'm happy with it just being me.
It's a community of one over here. Folks.
I'm more than satisfied. Yeah. So like,
Right.
The general person would jump ship. I'm not the general person, right? Like the average person wouldn't care, and they would agree with everybody else. Like, yeah, why are we still carrying all these DVDs? Like, let's take these to Value Village. Let's get rid of this shit. So
I remember when we were younger, Criterion DVDs used to be had quite the cachet,
right?
Like if you had those in your collection, that meant something.
Oh, just even knowing the word Criterion,
right. And now you can walk through a store and still see Criterion DVDs out there, but they don't kind of pull you in the same way that they used to. And I'll be honest, my favorite Criterion title now is our Godzilla collection. Just because those are movies we actually watch and enjoy rather than just having them to say that we have them, right? So, yeah.
But yeah, to touch on your point again, I don't think I think individually people will decide, if everybody else is getting out of a collecting category, if they feel pressure. I do think there is pressure, though, where you never want to be the last guy holding the bag. Yeah. You don't want to be the last guy part of that community because then suddenly you're uncool. And as communities shrink, people do jump ship for sure. And movies are a big one.
Yeah, can you collect something if no one else is collecting it?
The answer is yes, because, people, I was talking about like different collecting categories have, let's say, retro toys are 5 million, records are 1 million. There's collecting categories where you're talking couple hundred.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like there you can go, like, collecting is exactly as it sounds. It's acquiring items that are part of a category of thing.
Right.
It could be anything.
But would you not argue that there has to be an element of the chase there? Like, there has
Right,
to
but I
be-
mean, there's people that collect fucking antiques and shit.
Right. Right.
But they don't think of it as collecting because in their mind, they're like, see, I think collecting gets lumped in with pop culture items.
Right.
So items of pop culture, like, that are part of the overall movies, music, ad icons, like our culture. Pop culture items, they get the collecting title attached to them. But I mean, people collect, like, to me, antiques, unless they're pop culture, aren't really, like, I don't think of it as collecting, but I bet you those people do.
Yeah, that's true.
Like Victorian
That's
lamps or some shit. Like, I have obviously no idea what I'm talking about, but you know,
If you collect Victorian lamps, please let us know in the comments.
Do you think that's a thing, Victorian? Because I mean, I was just
with gas and everything.
Well,
like,
no, I always just hear people add Victorian to blank, and it's like, well, that's a thing.
that just makes it
Right.
something, right?
Yeah. There's probably none of it's probably Victorian. They're just like added, and you know what I'm saying? Like, people that want to sound like they know what they're talking about, they
Right.
just add Victorian to
Well,
it.
it's like putting the word antique on something.
Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
It's like, it's an antique car. No, it's just a piece of crap car. that you have.
Right. Yeah. It is a relic of
That's
a car.
right,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, sorry, you asked originally what was hot, and I gave you what was not.
So you went as far away from answering the question as you possibly
Well,
could.
now let me
Right.
give. So now I've given you the inverse. Well, because I'm relating it to what I sell and in my experience. So why don't I go the opposite and tell you what is hot? So all collectibles are hot right now because it's a time of recession.
Yeah.
It's a time of, you know, some depression, honestly, among people. It's a time of a bad economy, a fucked up world economy, fucked up world politics. And when times aren't good, what do people look for? Escape.
Correct.
People look for escape and nostalgia. They want to feel comfort. They want joy. And toys, video games, trading cards, music, all that shit gives them that.
Reminds them of a happier time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And because of that, because times aren't good, and I think the majority of the average person is stressed to shit right now and not happy, and probably scared of, you know, of what may come. It's making everybody into collectors. So I'm seeing the demographic has widened so much now, and because of that, every collecting category got a boost. Like, everything got a boost. So records got hotter than they've ever been. I don't buy and sell records. I just know this because my father owns a record store. I should actually mention that as well. So my dad owns a record store. So I have a bit of a window into that collecting category. But I mean, I talk to other dealers that sell. When you own a collectibles store, you're also a part of another secret club, which is other guys that own geek shops.
The collectible store cabal.
No,
basically.
literally. Yeah, no. So I know other dealers that I talk to at shows, they sell shit that I don't sell. So I don't deal in cards or comics, but I know a lot of people that do, and they tell me how those categories are going, right? And everything has gotten a booster shot the last couple of years, especially during COVID, because everybody was home alone, bored as fuck, with the booster injection of COVID relief money, which I think we're in Canada, but I think they also got some form of that in the States as well.
Right.
And people had money to burn, and they weren't going out spending it on dinners and entertainment. So fuck, collectibles went insane.
It was a great time to partake in activities that you could do by yourself, and reacquainting yourself with collecting is definitely something that you could do for that. We saw that in the comic book, the key issue industry as well, right? Things were selling for 10 times what they would normally go for.
Yeah, because you had that many more people get in on the hobby.
Right. They got time. They're thinking about, they got time to read, right? So if you're reading comics, you're going to be interested in wanting to collect those books that are associated with the books that you like to read, right? and you've got money, your expenses are probably minimal because you're not traveling. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything, right? Yeah, absolutely.
You can justify burning that money.
Well, I don't know if you could justify it. But
Yeah.
you
Well, I
certainly
think a
doing
lot
it.
of people have regret now
Yeah.
because of it. But to your point about like you were talking about like comics suddenly, some of them went 10x during that period. And I should say during COVID, like the 2 years of the intermittent lockdowns and all that, when everybody was stuck at home, collectibles definitely got a booster shot from that and skyrocketed. But I would say while the prices have started to level off,
Softened a bit.
they've softened a lot because now we're in a recession and times are not as good. Right. So, and the world economy is not great right now. So prices definitely softened, but I would say the amount of people still interested in those hobbies did not go down. So what you were touching on was like, oh, comics suddenly, were selling for 10 times what they previously sold for. Well, the difference was a comic that maybe was a really expensive comic. Maybe in the world there would have been, I don't know, 5,000 people that would have been actually interested and able to spend that amount of money. Suddenly that doubled.
Right.
Well, that makes a huge fucking impact. When you've got when the buyer market grows that much, that's when you see prices skyrocket. It's all supply and demand ultimately, right? No one gives a fuck about Victorian lamps, so they're not
antique cars.
Right. Yeah, well, I think there's lots of money in it, but we obviously know nothing about that shit. No. Although one of us does actually own, and I guess I wouldn't call it an antique, but I do own. I'll call it a relic because it's an old piece of shit. But yeah.
Would you say that is the greatest collectible item that you have?
Fuck no.
No,
that thing's a fucking money pit.
He has a DeLorean, folks, like a legitimate DeLorean. He spent far too much money rebuilding this thing.
Way too much money.
It was a
cool idea.
Right. I've never actually seen this vehicle run, despite how much work
despite our friendship for well over a decade.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think
it's a money pit.
You have a T-shirt with a DeLorean on it. I think I've seen the T-shirt
get more use,
experience, and get more action than the car. Right.
That is correct.
That's right.
Yeah. No, it is not my greatest collectible. It is my most expensive collectible.
It is my greatest shame.
Right. Well, no, it never stops costing money. Right. So like everything else I own, with the exception of movies, the toys and the video games I collect, they tend to appreciate in value.
Correct.
And it's not that I give a shit because I'm not ultimately trying to make money. Like the shit that's on my shelves is there because I want it. It's not there to then later flip in my store, right? So but it's still a good feeling when you go like, oh wow, that's now worth $2,000. It was worth $1,500 a year ago. The DeLorean does the exact opposite. While it does appreciate in value, it costs so much fucking money to maintain that goddamn piece of shit built car.
Hey, doesn't matter. He still has a DeLorean. It's all that matters.
Right? Yeah. It looks cool.
Yeah. Girls don't know what it is.
No, they think it looks cool. They just don't really. No, I mean, I don't know. The average person, I mean,
most people have seen Back to the Future.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would say it gets more interest from a general person than car people because of its pop culture significance. Right. Otherwise, I wouldn't own the fucking thing because I'm not a car guy. I bought it because I'm a fucking movie nerd.
That was his 13-year-old purchase when he didn't think that one through.
I bought that car when I was 23.
So that was definitely OSAP money as well.
No, it wasn't. No. I leased that car. Can you believe a car company gave me a lease on a DeLorean?
A DeLorean.
Well, I mean, you can borrow money on anything if you've got good credit,
I do love the fact that you have a DeLorean. So
it's cool.
I think we're going to have to make that a consistent theme throughout the podcast.
We'll
take a shot. We'll take shots at you about the DeLorean.
Yeah. It'll be a term. So it'll be a term to refer to collectors that throw bad money
and continue
at collectibles. You know what I'm saying? Right. So it'll be like, oh, it's like a DeLorean.
DeLorean, that one.
A DeLorean owner. Right. Yeah. That'll be a term for collectors spending money on stupid shit.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. I'm basically in the same category as a Beanie Baby collector. I mean,
Sure.
I mean, that,
Right.
Pretty much the same shit.
You could drive a Beanie Baby about as far as you can drive that DeLorean. Right?
That's right. Yeah. This podcast is sponsored by the fine folks at Fly By Night Movies, Games, and Toys. Fly By Night Movies, Games, and Toys is your one-stop shop for everything cool and collectible. We are located in the heart of downtown Oshawa. That is Oshawa, Ontario, Canada. If you're looking for movies, video games, and toys, check us out. We are worth the drive. So that answers the second question. What else you got?
Well, I feel like you... I don't know if we're ready to give you credit for that answer, because your answer to the question, what is hot right now?
No, but I told you what wasn't.
Yeah, and then you told me everything is hot.
Yeah, right. Which is true. Okay, fine. You want to get more fucking specific?
I mean,
to like, how much more specific do you want? Then you want to know
other than everything.
Right, but that's the truth.
What is that?
But
that's a cop out.
Right,
that's a cop out answer. Right?
Okay, but here, let me list the things for you that are hot right now.
Sure.
Okay. Trading cards are extremely hot. Sports cards have exploded in the last couple of years, weirdly. They've come back mostly because they now have a lot of what I'll call scammy digital promotions attached to them. But okay, cards are hot. Toys are fucking hot. I mostly deal in Funko Pops when it comes to toys, but every part of toys is hot right now. Look at Marvel Legends. Look at Star Wars Black Series. Look, you're talking mass fucking produce, and people are eating that shit up. They're going to regret it later when they find out most of that shit will not go up in value because they mass produced it, but whatever. It's hot. Video games are fucking on fire right now. That includes retro and modern. Modern games are exploding. And yeah, there's the generic video game. I'm not even going to call them a collector, video gamer, and they're going to have the whatever AAA titles, Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty and all that shit in their collection. But I'm talking about like the collectors. So those are the guys that want the more prestigious indie titles, the harder to find stuff, the limited editions, I fucking hate this company, but limited run games, smaller publishers that don't put out as many copies and they do limited runs of specific titles. I know, I hate that shit.
Artificial scarcity.
Bingo.
Yeah, manufactured rarity. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. That's the whole discussion.
Right.
But that's hot right now. So that shit's selling for more than it's ever sold. I mean, what used to take, like, let's use video games as an example. What used to take, let's say, a decade to organically appreciate in value can happen in 6 months now. Because there's so many people in the hobby, the time frame for something to become hot and collectible and appreciate in value is so shortened now. That window has shrunk hugely,
But would you think that maybe that's the case of the candle that burns twice as bright?
You think it's just going to like fizzle out?
Right. If for something that doesn't take time to appreciate, there's always the risk that maybe it hasn't really appreciated and it'll drop back like a stone.
Well, that all comes down to what the buy-in is, right? And the buy-in is what is the collector base that's fueling this. Yeah. And if the collector base shrinks, then that's exactly what happens. So is that going to happen? It's going to happen for some collecting categories, like I'm going to tell you right now, Star Wars Black Series and Marvel Legends. You watch that shit plummet in value because they cranked that shit out like crazy. I swear to God, they must have backed a fucking garbage truck up to Toys R Us every week and just dumped into their shelves, like into the toy aisle of Walmart and Toys R Us.
It's not, you can't collect something if everyone can have it. Like, there's just got to be
infinitely. Infinitely, And that's the other thing is like, you can't infinitely keep putting out this shit and think that it's always going to go up in value.
Right.
No, there's a cap at a certain point where you have now overproduced for that market. Yeah. The buy-in isn't there anymore. So, but to your point of like, okay, what's going to depreciate, what's not going to, it just all depends on the collector base. Video game collectors, that base is just, I think right now, I could be wrong about this, but I think video games, this happened years ago now, video games outpaced movies now in terms of profitability.
Oh, wow.
I think video games as an industry now makes more money than movies. I could be making that up, folks. I don't know. I own a video game store, so I don't know.
Please don't fact check any of the numbers that we have included.
No, but I think that's a real thing. I think
it's reasonable to think.
Right? I think that video games have now outpaced movies at this point and are the larger entertainment category. So that base just keeps growing. But then you got like other bases. So like, sorry, I'm gonna dunk on 80s kids here for a second, but like, retro toys.
Yeah.
Your base, as you guys get older, your wives, they might tolerate a man cave,
right?
But at a certain point, they might not. And at a certain point, it may not be practical to have certain amount of space for He-Man figures and shit like that.
Right.
So I don't think that base grows because that collecting is attached to nostalgia.
Right.
So
no one's collecting Tinker toys anymore.
Right.
Though sadly, that group has
exactly. So the base expands and collapses. Yeah. So it just depends on what the collecting category is. Like Pokemon cards, I don't think have ever been hotter than they are right now. And that's because of an influx of new blood. And that's also because that franchise stays relevant by constantly putting out new games that bring in the new young people. Yeah. But I mean, like, there's certain franchises, there is no new shit coming out. So you're just selling to the same fucking people you were a decade ago. Well, those people die off and that group shrinks. Right.
Well,
is that a better answer?
I'm still waiting for you to get a CIB, a complete in-box copy of Chrono Trigger.
Chrono Trigger.
Yep.
I've actually had that once.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I? Yeah, I told you that, right?
I think when you first opened the store, I remember seeing.
It was about 3 years in.
Yeah.
3 years in, somebody just randomly brought one in. Yeah. And it didn't last long. No. I think I sold it for, I want to say $500 bucks, which at the time was like top dollar.
What would that be now?
Do you want to look it up? We actually have a computer here we have not used to look up anything. So
despite the fact that we have access to all of the information in the world via the interwebs, we haven't used it for any of the random numbers and stats that we've tossed out today.
I think all the numbers I've said are accurate.
Right.
Yeah, 5 million, 10 million, 1 million.
Yeah.
Those are accurate numbers.
I don't like the idea that the 80s toys collectors are only like 500 or whatever you said.
I don't remember what I said.
I'm offended by that. Right?
Yeah.
One thing to know, obviously to understand, there is a slight age gap between Justin and I, which I think helps to bring in a different viewpoint. I think
it's a good thing.
Yeah. I was born in the late 70s, so for me, the 80s were prime time for me. I was definitely a kid during the 80s. The music, the toys, the cartoons, all of that stuff. I think it's lasted long. You were a kid of the 90s.
I'm a 90s kid. So literally you're an 80s kid. I'm a 90s kid. There's a decade between us.
I think I got the better deal because 90s media is just.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah. It's just DeLorean.
It's funny. Right? It's funny. Yeah, that's 80s. That's 80s pop culture. I find it funny that there for the longest time, and I love the pop culture of the 80s. Wait a minute, hold on a sec. Now you're getting into another fucking debate of 80s versus 90s pop culture. That's a whole fucking podcast if you want to do that.
On the next episode of Tales from the Toy Store.
We talk about something that has nothing to do with collecting. It's our personal opinions.
We're going to end up fighting by the end of that episode. So stay tuned.
Without a doubt. Yeah, that one will definitely get heated. But no, why don't we actually use a computer and look something up?
That's right. So remind me, what are we looking up here, Justin?
What did I say I was going to look up? Because I was like, I'll actually look that up. What the fuck was it?
I was legitimately asking you.
No, what were we going to look up? It wasn't the Chrono Trigger. How much Chrono Trigger costs?
Yep.
Okay. I'll just go to my my good friend eBay here and let's see how much a complete in box copy of Chrono Trigger is worth. It was $500. I don't know how long ago. How much do you think it's worth there, Mark? If you had to guess.
I'm going to say 700.
It's probably not a bad guess. Let me just go to the cheapest copy that you can get right now, and we're going to go buy it now and see what we see. Okay, so the cartridge alone is worth about $250, $300 now. That's gone up quite a bit since the last time I had one. What did you guess? How much?
700.
700. Yeah, it seems to be about $700 to $800. So it's gone up about $200 to $300 since the last time I had one. That sounds about right. Yeah. So there you go. We used the internet to find something.
You learned something today.
Yeah, we actually made use of having internet access on this podcast, and it was used to check the current value of a CIB Super Nintendo copy of Chrono Trigger.
Right. A good use of those resources.
Do you have it on the DS?
I do. Yeah.
Well, it's close enough.
Yeah. I used to actually have this game on the Super Nintendo, but when you're young and you want the next game, they all pass out of your collection. So.
And you throw the box out and
of course
throw that shit right in the trash where it belongs, right?
All those there's like a mailer inside where you can check off a whole bunch of things you want to get magazines about. Yeah. No, that all went in the trash.
Crumple it all up.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you got?
What else we got?
Wait, so because you said I gave a cop-out answer on what's hot. So now I literally went like category by fucking category and go, this is hot, this is hot. And I even gave you little reasons why they're hot. So now tell me, did that fulfill your did that satisfy your answer? Your question? No. That was
better. It bumped you from a 1 out of 5 to like a 3 out of 5.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Why don't you give me the next fucking question you got there on the list? What do you got next?
So you are obviously in a unique position in the collectibles industry because you are both a collectible deviant, like you have mentioned, like the rest of us are, but you also make a living from this. You run a store.
Right.
You must see tons of stuff coming in all the time.
Oh, yeah, I know where you're going. Right? I know where this is going.
How do you, as both you toe the line between collecting yourself, but also needing to keep the business going and not fill your home with tons of stuff, right? You obviously can get things at better price and you get a wide selection available to you. How do you balance, what comes into the house and what stays at the store?
Yeah. What comes home to my shelf and what stays on the store's shelf? I get asked this. This is probably one of the most common questions I get asked. Yeah. And people usually phrase it like this, like, how do you avoid the temptation to just take all this shit home?
Bring all of it with you. Yeah.
Right. Everything that comes, like, you must just take so much of this stuff home. And I'll make it very easy for people to understand this concept. A good collector who owns a business, a good business collector, understands the importance of actually selling what he has at his store or they have at their store. So I understand that the way I thought of this when I was first starting out and cool shit started coming in that I actually wanted was every time something came in, so let's use Chrono Trigger. Okay, I'm not a huge fan of Chrono Trigger, but let's say I wanted it, right? And it came in, and I told you I sold it for $500. So if it came in and I knew what it was worth, and it doesn't matter what the store bought it for. Let's say the store got it for $200 or $250, whatever. When I took it home, the rationale, the way I would think of it in my mind is, I didn't spend $250 on it. I spent $500. So whatever the retail value was, in my mind, that's what it cost me to take that home. Right. So I had to be able to justify whatever amount of money it was taking that out of the income I was making. Because you got to remember, I'm making my money, my living is selling that Chrono Trigger. So by taking it home, that's $500 I didn't make. So while it technically didn't get deducted from my paycheck, it did because that's $500 less that I made overall.
Right.
So everything I take out of the store comes out of my personal pocket in that sense. I might get it for less than you would get it for. You would have to give me $500 for it. And it only cost me $250, but in fact, it actually cost me $500, the same as you, because I didn't sell that.
Yeah.
So that
if you take it home. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the way I have to look at it. That is the healthiest way to look at it, because then you're never going to become too overindulgent on taking shit out of your own store. Right. And if you just cherry pick all the best shit that comes in, you're hurting your business and you're hurting your customers too, because you're not, like, While you didn't get it, somebody else got that Chrono Trigger, and I made that guy's fucking day, right?
Yep.
And he probably still has that.
Yeah, the things that you would want to take home are the things your customers are looking to buy as well.
Right, because I'm one of them, right? So do I take shit home? Abso-fucking-lutely. Of course I take shit home, but I'm very cautious about taking too much shit and taking too much money out of the business. Right. And I generally balance it. So I go month by month, and I go, okay, this month I took 1-2 things out of the store that I wanted for my personal collection. Okay, I'm good. You know, and if let's say, let's use Chrono Trigger again. So let's say this month, we're in July. Let's say by the end of the month, I already took a couple pieces out of the store for my personal collection, and then Chrono Trigger walks in, but I really want it. If it's something I have to have, then I'll justify it and I'll go, okay, that's coming on with me, and next month I can't take anything out of the store. Right. But more than likely, I'm very disciplined, so I'm going to go, okay, I really want this, but I've already taken a lot out this month. I got to let this sit a month and try to make the money first before I can justify it. You know, let's put it out on the shelf and see if it turns a profit. If it doesn't, then it's easier for me to go, okay, it's meant to be, I take it home. The other thing I realize is, as a dealer, and especially because now I've literally been a dealer for over a decade now,
right.
like buying and selling
right.
collectibles. So as a dealer, the other thing that the perspective I have compared to like what a regular collector might have is, you guys have more of a FOMO. Like, you know what I mean by FOMO?
Yeah, I mean, I experienced that with certain comic books. This might be the only one you ever find in the wild.
Right. And as a dealer, let me tell you, we want you to think that,
right.
But as a dealer, we always get it again.
Right.
Like, in reality, if we got it once, we're going to get it again.
You are in the unique position where that will happen, right? Yeah.
Yeah, see, I have that perspective.
Things are coming to you rather than you having to go and seek them out, right?
Right. Yeah. So as a dealer, it's much easier for me to go, like, I'm going to use an example. Are you familiar with the video game Rule of Rose for the PS2?
No.
Okay, let me just show you the value on this game real quick. We're gonna use the internet and eBay once again. I know, twice in one episode. Yeah. So I'm just gonna type in PS2 complete Rule of Rose. It doesn't matter if you know anything about the game. I just literally want you to look at the values of this game. So these are actually still. We're just gonna scroll down because these are still the Japanese version. So let's find a North American version. Oof. Okay, so they're
climbing up very quickly.
Right here. Yeah. So as you can see, that's $1,000 video game, right? As a collector, I bet you, if you walked into my store and saw that, if you knew what this game was and you really want it, you'd go, I might never see this again. I have gotten my hands on this game probably 10, 12 times.
Wow.
Yeah. In over the span of a decade. So that's an average of like more than once a year, I've gotten my hands on this copy of this game. So as a dealer, if you're in the business long enough, you don't flinch as much with shit. You go, like, there's a normality to it where I don't panic as much. I've sold a lot of shit that I wanted for my personal collection, but it didn't bother me much because I went, I'll get it again. Like, my dad actually is hugely against, like, he's worse than me. Like, me, I love, like, I want to maintain a personal collection. My dad is of the mindset of, like, his inventory is his personal collection. So he doesn't really care what comes and goes because he's always getting new shit in. So it doesn't bother him as much. That's an interesting perspective. I don't think like that at all.
That would be tough. Right.
Do you know what I mean by that, though? But in his mind, he's like, my stock of my store is my personal collection. So I don't need to have anything at home. If I want to listen to anything, I'll just take something out of the store stock at any point. And
yeah, but then you might not be inclined to want to sell anything out of your collection either. Right?
Well, no, but he's not attached to anything because he doesn't care, because he just knows I'll get it again.
Right.
Like, he knows that he's going to get another Pink Floyd The Wall. He's going to get another Beatles White Album. Like, he doesn't give a shit. It's going to come back again. So he doesn't panic about it. He doesn't do what we do, where we go, I have to have Criterion Blade Runner because if this goes out of print,
that's it.
How am I going to get it again, right? But in his mind, he goes, I'll get another copy. I don't care about, I don't need to panic about making sure I have all the best records of all time or all the best movies of all time, because at some point it's going to come in my hands again.
So knowing that, knowing that, for example, if we look at your example here, Rule of Rose,
Right.
right? That you've had, how many copies did you say? 10 copies?
I've had, I would say, 10 or 12 copies within the last decade. So I would say literally a copy a year, at least.
Right. Do you find that that takes some of the shine off of your collecting interest, knowing that, there really isn't sort of a sense of urgency, which I think does drive collecting?
So I'm going to say this, and I'm trying not to sound like a douche when I say this, but the FOMO you have,
Right.
I don't have that on a lot of the things I collect. And let me tell you, I'm really happy to get rid of it. That's one of the biggest advantages, and owning your own business and running a collectible store is a fucking hell. And
Right.
it's not an easy gig, folks. It's like, I know people think, they go, you just put a bunch of toys in a store, and that's a falsehood that a lot of collectors make that mistake, and they forget to actually run a fucking business, and there's a lot of grind to that. But one of the advantages, like one of the things that makes the grind and hustle of running a fucking retail store in this day and age is I don't have to panic as much about missing out on items and never seeing them again. And I basically can pace myself. Each thing that I collect, I can collect it at a pace that I dictate. And that's hugely empowering.
One thing that I've always been impressed with is your personal toy collection that you have in your home is very well presented. Glass cabinets, focuses primarily on horror and sci-fi figures.
Yep.
Of the kind of the McFarlane style.
McFarlane and NECA.
Right.
Yep.
But the one thing that has always surprised me is that all of them are opened. They're all out on display, out of package. And I think that kind of plays into what you're saying. You don't have to worry about, oh my God, if I open this, that's it. The magic of it is ruined, and you get to appreciate it for what it is rather than what it might be worth to the next person who owns it after you.
Right, because I already have a collectible store that makes profit off of buying toys off of people and then reselling them. So that part of that niche is already fulfilled in my life.
Right.
So I don't give a fuck about the personal shit I bring home, the personal things I bring home. They don't need to make money for me.
Right.
I don't give a shit. I already have a store that does that. So I don't fucking care. The stuff that comes home, that goes on my shelf and collects dust, it's the shit I actually want to be there.
Right.
But you're right. To your point, a collector like yourself, you have to think about that. Yeah. It's going to enter your mind because you're not buying and selling shit. So it's going to enter your mind where you go, should I open this?
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not going to care, because I don't give a shit. The store already, I'll get another one. I'll flip that one.
It's not uncommon for collectors to associate what the expected value of something is to the items that they have. I think that's kind of inherent in collecting. I mean, we just did it right now, right? Looking up the Chrono Trigger and the Rule of Rose there, right?
Yeah, the value.
Right. But if you're never going to sell it because you're so afraid of losing it and never getting another one, it doesn't really matter what it's worth, because to you it's just worth having it, right? So you're right, walking past your cabinets with all the figures that you have, it's impressive, right? But it's also impressive from the fact that very few collectors would do this, and they're suffering for it because, man, Justin's enjoying this stuff and it looks really cool. And anybody else who would keep these in a box, man, you're missing out.
Well, you're touching on a large problem in the collecting category right now. So do you mind if I go on a tangent for a second?
Please.
Okay, so I have a bit of a rant. So remember how I was saying during COVID, every collecting category got a boost.
Right.
And all of a sudden, everybody and their mother was getting in on collecting video games and collecting action figures and Funko Pops and all that shit, right?
Yep.
And right now, even post-COVID lockdown shit, I think every category is hot right now. That's what I was saying. Do you know a large portion of that group, of those collecting communities, part of the reason they all ballooned is because you got a bunch of jackasses trying to make money off of them. And I don't mean the jackasses like me that own stores. I mean every other guy that thinks they can get rich off of all this shit now. And you've got jackasses on YouTube telling you how to invest in this and that and how to flip comics. And look, guys, I bought this for that. And look how easy it is to get rich. And because the economy is not good, because people are stressed out, and because people are panicked about money, everybody's buying into it. And everybody's drinking the fucking Kool-Aid.
Right.
So people are buying up action figures thinking that they're sitting on a gold mine. That's their retirement fund. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that is such a problem in the collecting community right now because it drives up prices artificially because you've got speculators.
Yep.
Is really what they're called. Like, you know this term.
The comic book industry almost died in the 90s because of this very thing. Yeah.
And it's not just comic books, it's in every collectible category. It has speculators have gotten into every fucking corner of collectibles now. Right. And without getting too far on a tangent, the companies themselves aren't helping. They're playing into it, which is a fucking huge problem. Right. But that's a whole other issue. But you've got all these speculators now that they're buying it because they think they're going to get rich off it later on. So they're not buying it to enjoy the shit. So they're buying toys off me. They're not opening them. They're going in a temperature-controlled storage unit, and they're thinking they're going to crack it in a decade and get rich. You know, not understanding that it's a lot more complicated than that, and selling shit is actually hard. It's not an easy endeavor. And they're also not thinking, oh, hey, there's going to be a million other jackasses like me doing the exact same fucking thing, right? But then
you're the only jackass like you. So.
Right, yeah. This is a particular breed of jackass. Right. Yeah. This is a demonic jackass.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
But then you've also got people that they're not speculators, but they're almost kind of like influenced by speculators because it's almost like they see that things are like Rule of Rose. Let's use the Rule of Rose as an example. So they see something like Rule of Rose and they go, well, I want it because I'm interested in it, but maybe I shouldn't play it because it might be too valuable. So I'm just going to keep it sealed because what if it skyrockets, you know? So they're not buying it. The difference is the intent.
Right.
So those guys aren't buying it to get rich. They're buying because they want it, but they're afraid that they are going to miss out on the paycheck. It's like they're afraid of, it's like they bought a ticket and they're afraid that they're going to miss out when their number's called. You know what I mean? Like they're going to miss the lotto numbers being called and then be like, oh shit, I fucking opened this. And now they called the number and it turns out that this factory sealed Jason Voorhees Part 7 from NECA is selling for $500 and I cracked mine open. You know what I mean?
Is the Jason Voorhees from NECA sealed selling for $500?
Fuck no.
No?
No, but that would be to get, but I guarantee you I've sold probably 10 of those to people that thought might be.
Right.
And they probably had that debate when they went to open it and went, I don't know.
I don't know. Your diorama looks much better.
But mine's certainly fucking cracked, isn't it? Yeah. So you're just touching on a mindset of like, there's the speculators and then there's the people that I think are influenced by the there's the genuine collectors like myself that want to enjoy the shit that we buy. And then there's the speculators that are buying it, in my opinion, with bad intent. They're just trying to get rich off the shit. They're probably not even interested in the shit they're buying. You see that a lot with Pokemon cards and cards in general. And then you get the guys that are kind of in between. That I would say they're genuine collectors, but it's almost like they're influenced by the speculators and it makes them insecure.
Right.
Yeah. So what was the question that led? You're going to hear that a lot on this program. Theme. Yeah. Of what was the thing that you asked me that started this whole tangent I then went on. But do you have another question for me?
I do.
Another genuine question, right?
And again, because Justin is not prepared for these questions, he may or may not decide to answer this. We'll see what he says.
Right.
But I'm always interested to know what's coming in. So you're a guy that sees it all, so nothing really blows you away. But there's got to be every once in a while, like some items that walk through the front door that just even make you, as the guy that gets 10 copies of Rule of Rose over a decade, go, wow, that's impressive. That's a big one. Right?
So that's a very good question.
Yeah.
So the question is, what excites a store owner?
That's right.
Like what excites us that walks through the door? Because at this point, you're right. I've gotten my hands on 10 copies of Rule of Rose. So if another one comes, and literally to use Rule of Rose as an example, the store just bought a copy like 4 months ago. So we literally just got a copy in.
Right.
And when it came in, I went, that's great. But I wasn't like, holy fuck, we got a Rule of Rose. But I'll say this, every store owner is different. But for me personally, it depends on my mood. If I want to make money off of something, I'm going to get excited when what I call gold, when gold walks into my store. If my employee calls me up, and I'm not always at the store, I have employees. Yep. And if one of my employees calls me up and goes, someone just traded in a huge box of complete and box Super Nintendo games, I'm going to get fucking excited because my first thought is like, there's going to be a ton of money in there. So I'm thinking profit. I'm thinking I'm thinking the business side of it. It's almost the equivalent of having a store and being like, damn, we just got an order of this hot new action figure for the Christmas season. We're going to sell a fuck ton of this.
Right.
So there's that mindset. But I think what you want to know.
Yeah, that's the boring answer that I was.
No, but like that, I'm going to give you both. So
That's
I
right.
know what there's that side of it. There's the store owner side of it where I get excited thinking about the profit the store is going to make.
Yep.
Right. But then what you want to know is like, what still excites me personally.
Right.
And I think that genuinely my personality, I'm a natural like wheeler dealer, and I still get excited. The random guy that walks in my store with a box or a bag, the mystery of what could be in that box, could be in that bag, could be in that tote, what I'm about to see, what he's about to put on my counter, I get excited every time.
Right.
Legitimately, there's a little excitement in me every single time. And I think if you own a collectible store or you own any kind of store where you're buying shit off people and you don't get that excitement, you should get the fuck out of that career.
Right.
Because you must be dead inside at that point. Like you don't even give a shit because I don't know how you couldn't get excited because you're bringing me lottery tickets. You're bringing me, you know what I'm saying? I'm not hunting any of that shit. I don't know what you're bringing. There's, that you talked about, like collectors talk about the excitement of the hunt. The thrill of the hunt, right? For me, I don't go hunting. The prey just walks into my store.
Right.
You get what I mean? And I'm not trying, I'm sure I'm coming across as a total fucking douchebag when I'm saying this, but I can't go hunting because I have to run a fucking store.
Yeah.
So your version of you get to go and shop at all the stores like mine to find fucking Chrono Trigger, right? I have to wait for it to come to me. So my thrill of the hunt is different than your thrill of the hunt.
You get the pleasure of, I have no idea what he's got in that bag, and I'm about to find out. And maybe it's nothing of great interest, or maybe it is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And every single time that someone brings in something, a bag or a box, I get that rush. I get that little rush where I don't know what he's going to have. And so I have that for every kind of mystery that comes in through the door, the mystery of the unknown of I don't know what you're bringing to sell to me. So I get that. But in terms of like, if you want to go even more specific of like, okay, once I crack the box, what still excites me? Shit that I've never gotten my hands on.
That's fair.
That's the simplest way to put it is like, I've already gotten Rule of Rose fucking 10 times, right? But I've never gotten my hands on, I don't know, top of my head, a Neo Geo. That's a very rare item. I've never gotten my hands on a Neo Geo. Someone brought in a Neo Geo complete in the box. That would make my fucking day. I'd be like, I fucking got one of these. Wow. So one walked in, or a video game kiosk or something really unique. That's what excites me.
And we're not just talking about a Neo Geo Pocket Color.
No, I've gotten like infinity of those.
It's like I got like 10 of them right now.
No, man. We're talking the actual like Neo Geo console.
Right.
But like, so the shit that I've never gotten my hands on, that's the stuff that personally excites me. I like seeing that stuff. And it's not just a thrill for me because, there's the brag part of it. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, do dealers brag to each other? Yeah, of course we brag to each other. But, I mean, some are more obnoxious than others about it. I won't go down that path, but we talk to each other. The dealers, like the inner community, the cabal as you called us, when we're at shows, we talk about our recent acquisitions. You know, when we're at shows, we are showing each other to, like, look at the cool stuff that I got my hands on. Like, this just walked in, you know, and it's luck of the draw. It could have been any one of us, especially when we're in the same fucking area.
That close proximity, right?
Oh, right, yeah. Like a lot of my competitors, you're talking a 15, 20-minute drive. The reason I got in the Chrono Trigger versus somebody else got in the Chrono Trigger, it's fucking luck. It's luck, folks. Like, let's put it this way. If regardless of what I think of my own store or what people think of my store, you could take the greatest collectible store ever and the shittiest pawn shop. They have equal odds of landing stuff. They really do. It's random. People take things wherever they take things. You can try to sway the odds, you know, by getting a good reputation for buying and being fair with people. But I still hear stories of people that donated things to Value Village and fucking sold things on Facebook Marketplace for nothing and let it go for a song. I mean, fuck, people come into my store and brag to me about their acquisitions and shit, you know? So there is that, the brag portion of it. There's that pride of, like, my business got its hands on a Neo Geo Complete in box. That's fucking cool.
Right.
But the other reason I get really excited is I get excited for my customers.
I was just going to ask, you know, obviously, you know, the experience is somewhat muted for you given the industry that you work and the fact that you need to turn this into dollars and cents. But you also have the opposite impact that you get to watch collectors see that thing, right? That sort of captures them. Do you have any cool stories or experiences? Anything that sort of stands out that you can share?
I mean, I've made so many people's lives better that it's hard to. I can't think of one specifically, but no, but I wouldn't have one specific, but look, we talk about the thrill of the hunt, right?
Yep.
And we were talking about, like, what excites me. And genuinely, and not to get sappy, genuinely, I get excited when I get cool shit in my store because I know I'm going to make somebody's day. Right. That guy who got that Chrono Trigger, I made that guy's fucking day. And if I get another one and you come in and you happen to spot it, I'm going to make your day that day. And I get to be part of that moment.
Right.
So I get both sides of the thrill of the hunt in that sense. I get the thrill of the hunt of the thrill of what's going to be coming to my store today, what's going to walk through the door. That excites me. But then once I put it on the shelf, I get to share in your excitement for when you have that moment of that find. And that's fucking awesome. It really is.
During times when, you know, we know the world is not at the best right now, right? You get to add a little bit of joy every once in a while.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
I used to say, and I meant this genuinely, but I used to say, because people ask, you know, like, what do you sell? And I literally used to say, I sell fun for a living.
Right.
Because I honestly do. I'm selling you fun. I'm selling you escapism. You don't practically need the things that I sell. Like, honestly, I'm not selling practical items. I am a luxury. You know, I'm in the luxury business. I'm in the nostalgia business. I'm selling you fun and joy. I'm not selling you stress and misery.
He's also in the pain and suffering business because he fooled me into believing that he had a exclusive Biff McFarlane Funko Pop available in his store. It turned out to be an April Fool's Day joke, and I bit hard on that one. And I weeped a tear. I will be honest. So even though he says that his business is all joy and fun for his customers,
right?
Not necessarily, right? Sometimes it's pain and suffering, and his friends have felt that. Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely not above pranking my own customers. That's for sure. Yeah. And the funny thing is, like, what you're referencing, I'm sure 99% of the people watching or listening to this podcast will have no fucking clue what you're talking about because they don't even know my store exists.
Right.
So they'll be like, who is this Biff McFarlane character that Mark keeps mentioning? Who the fuck is that? Is this another guy that's coming on the podcast?
Oh, I don't know if you want to show him the site, but it was believable. Like
that was a good prank.
Yeah. I was very happy for you to see that your business had reached a point where
exclusive Funko Pop.
where Funko was willing to do this with you. And then he
Not
pulled,
so.
he pulled the rug out from underneath me, and
From everybody.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a little bit of trickery involved when it comes to the customers. But I made some people's day. They thought it was funny.
yep,
People that can read and they scroll down to the bottom and saw April Fools.
right. Laughed at those of us who took it hook, line, and sinker. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have another question there for me?
I actually don't.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
Wow.
That's it. Yeah.
It came up quick. We've been recording for
Yeah.
almost 2 hours.
Yep.
Can you believe that? Isn't it funny? It goes by quick, eh?
There wasn't really any gaps either. Like,
Well, that's a good podcast.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the sign of a top quality podcast that you will find on the Two Name Media Network. You had some good questions there.
Yep.
Yeah, there were some genuine good questions, and it exactly like what we were already doing, where you were asking me this shit and it would generate good dialogue. Same fucking thing. I think it generates good dialogue.
Created some decent tangents that we know we could use for other conversations.
Right. The questions, a lot of the shit you ask me, it opens up opportunities. Like it gives me a platform to discuss other things, other parts of the larger question you're asking me.
Right.
There's just so much to the business of collectibles, and you could have podcasts like the shit we're talking about. Like we're broad stroking a lot of shit,
Right.
but I mean, guys have podcasts that just do like comics.
Yep.
Or just movies, or just video games, or just you name the collectible category. There's so much to eat to all of this that you can do entire podcasts on a single collectible category.
Right.
And it'd still be interesting, and there would be some overlap with some of the shit that other podcasters would be talking about, because there's some general themes and that pop up in all of these different collectible categories, but they would have their own, unique language and stories to it, right? So,
are you interested in having a segment of the show where we talk about the things that come into your store?
oh, like just random neat shit that we got?
Yeah. Because obviously the Tales from the Toy Store element, there should be something about your toy store that...
Well,
I noticed that you might be a little bit apprehensive about talking about specific, which I understand.
So like, I guess a good way of putting it is like, so I referenced like the Rule of Rose, right?
Yeah.
So like, I don't want to do a segment that's like, well, this month we got in this and we got in this. That's what my Instagram's for.
Yeah.
If you want to know that kind of shit, follow my fucking Instagram, or better yet, come into the fucking store. No, honestly,
It's a good store.
No, but stores
yeah.
are meant to be
Right.
fucking shopped in. And without getting into a whole other rant, because I know at some point you're going to ask me how has online affected e-commerce affected my business. Fucking browse. Like, honestly, go into stores and look. We can't post every single goddamn item that we have for sale.
It is a lost art. And it's an element of enjoyment to the hobby that many people have probably lost.
The thrill of the hunt.
Right.
Honestly, the thrill of the hunt. So, like, actually come in the store and browse. So I'm not going to give you a breakdown and a play-by-play of everything we bought and sold in a given month or a given time period, but I will reference things directly from my store.
Yep.
I'll reference things that I sold. I'll reference things that we acquired lately, and I'll give you anecdotes. So that's the way I would rather do it.
Yeah.
Because this is all true. Like, I'm saying this from experience. Like, I literally had that Chrono Trigger that you saw it in my store, and we just bought a copy of Rule of Rose a couple months ago. So I'd rather do it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. But otherwise I'll answer, I'll answer whatever questions you have, but I'll use the business just kind of to relate to it as examples. I don't want the podcast to become
Your toy store ad. Yeah.
Right. And I don't want the podcast to become the fly by night podcast.
Right. Yeah.
So I think a better way of doing it is keeping more general about the collector community. You can ask me specific questions about the business, but I think what people are going to find the most interesting, and I'm always going to try to relate this, is to the overall hobby
Of collecting.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Because I think that's way more interesting. So the only way for you to get more of that content, though, is to tune back in to another episode of Tales from the Toy Store. Who knows what fucking shit this guy's sick mind will come up with for future episodes. All right. Thanks a lot, dude.
Thank you.